take one more question. The gentleman here. Front.
John Strayford. Chairman, Cristina said that an illustration of engagement in politics was Sarah Brown on Twitter.
No, I said that would be a bit of demeaning the idea of engagement, but at least it was political consciousness. You know, here's a million people who...
But I wasn't aware that she was a politician. And I have to say that Twitter is demeaning politics in a massive way. 140 characters of froth is what we're getting from it. And for Meg, who talked about hysteria and the people being hysterical, Meg, the hysteria has turned to anger. Because the reality is, they have got away with it. The political class hasn't been weakened, fatally or any otherwise. 150 MPs are retiring at this election, laughing all the way to the bank with their £65,000 payoffs and their big fat cap pensions, which are the best of any pension scheme in Europe. 400 MPs, all that has had to happen to them is they have repaid some of the money. The MPs next Parliament will be continuing to employ their spouses. Parliament had the tools to take action. It hasn't expelled a single MP. And yet, in 1947, it expelled the Labour MP Gary Allison. It had the power to do so, it failed to do so, and after this election, when the bills start being paid for the disastrous economic consequences we have got from this depression, believe you me, the anger of the people will be felt. It will be felt in changing this rotten political system, and it will be felt, if necessary, by the people taking to the streets.
It's now 8:15. Obviously, we want to go to the leaders' debate at 8:30, so we're going to ask Cristina to respond to the Twitter froth question, but also this broader question on other people who are perhaps disinterested in being able to vote in local.
Yeah, no, I actually wanted to answer the question raised by the gentleman with the red tie, because as somebody who has watched the Berlusconi phenomenon take place in my native Italy, I have to say that I welcome tabloid scrutiny. I love the fact that journalists are angry. I love the fact that there are many journalists and many newspapers that are independent and not owned by a political class or a political party or a politician. So I think I liked very much what Meg was saying about we should respect politicians, because many of them still have a vocation. But they do deserve scrutiny, they need scrutiny, and that is really, really important. And Twitter is a form of scrutiny. It might be frothy, it might be, evanescent, but I think that anything like that helps us keep the Berlusconis out and some of the vocational MPs like Frank Field in.
Any of those three issues that were raised by?
Yeah, I knew it was going to be an awkward place to be the defender, and I must remind you that I don't defend everything, and I think some pretty bad stuff happened, and I hope that if I was in there, I wouldn't have done that stuff. But what I'm trying to get across is politicians are just people, and actually, a lot of people in that situation would have done that stuff, and a lot of people are going from Parliament. A lot more will go from Parliament on the 6th of May, I'm sure, because of this stuff. But what these people committed were not crimes. 3 of them have been charged with crimes.
And getting legal aid.
Well, yes, and I don't like it either. But let's tone our language down a bit. And when the crime that you are accused of is voting against ID cards, I'm not in favour of ID cards, but ID cards exist in many democracies. That is not a crime against democracy. And when you vote against proportional representation, I might be in favour of proportional representation, but I don't think it's a crime against democracy to vote against proportional representation. This is why I say I think we need to tone our language down. And frankly, I brought one of these posters, I think. I don't think that things like this in our newspapers, in the run-up to a general election, wanted for failing our democracy, are going to help to restore the reputation of our political classes, whatever they might have done.
On those specific points, though, on the interrogation of, unless you want to come back on the power to extend thing, but on the specific.
I just want to say, I think it's a little lapse in imagination and humour on the part of Meg. Not to understand campaigning involves that kind of thing, but I do want to just then move on to what I think are important things. I think that people in the audience pick up on the fact that this is a tapestry of things that need to happen and change that needs to take place in order to restore trust in the institutions. Of course, there will continue to be scepticism about politics and politicians, because I think that's part of most systems. But I do think there's a lot of things can be done. I think that the committee, the select committee that Meg advised on, has brought out some very, very important recommendations to the working Parliament. Fantastic. I think you do need to see a way of reforming the Commons and the House of Lords to strengthen democracy. I don't think it's any good anymore having the place filled with appointees. I don't think it's acceptable in the 21st century. I do think that you have to look at your voting system. And I do think that we have to look at many different ways in which our democracy has been undermined. And I think transparency and all of that is vital to it. And so I think that we have to have a reforming Parliament. And we have to make politicians feel that there is a real urgency about their taking up the opportunity after this election to really make the changes that need to be made. And we have to say it.
Can I say one more thing, which I promise is not about this, and I promise it's a positive thing. In terms of where we go, I think one of the things which would be very helpful would be to get back to a politics of ideas, not a politics of managerialism. Big visions.
Yeah.
One of the things which is positive about that election campaign is I think that is happening. And I also very much agree with you that we need to celebrate public service. And while, yes, we must denounce people who've done bad things, when do we ever see stories about all the MPs who don't fiddle their expenses, who do work hard, who aren't in it for themselves? We don't see that, and I think that is the majority of politicians at national and local level. I really do.
I don't know about a majority, but I think you're right.
Now, given that in sort of just over 5 minutes' time, we're going to hear from those leaders hopefully putting forward some of their big ideas for particularly domestic policy. I just want to ask the panellists very quickly to perhaps give me one thing that they would really want to see from a new government. So, David, very quickly.
Someone else can first. Think about it.
Helena, one thing that you would like to see.
I want to see Labour coming in and Labour being a properly left-wing government.
Well, I thoroughly agree with Helena on that, but I would like to see us celebrate a culture of public service, and also perhaps what David Cameron is saying is beginning to move in that direction. Although fundamentally what I want is what Helena is saying. We should celebrate public service.
Cristina?
I'm afraid I think that David Cameron and the big society is the idea that has me thinking, there is a potential big idea there. So I'm sorry. I think I really believe in that.
Finally, David, one.
I was just going to say, one of the characters of the UK is we end up we distrust politicians, and we don't like government, and we don't like markets either, actually. We're unusual, we hate all those things. But one of the reasons why I guess I think it is very important, actually, essentially to have very good examples held up in political life, is precisely to show, actually take a lead in relation to our lives more generally. But actually, we can see the best of ourselves rather than the worst.
I'd like to thank all of the panellists for a lively debate. Let's hope that the one in the next few minutes is as exciting and as interesting. Please help yourself